Thanks very much. A little bit of a change of pace. This conference, as I'm sure you've seen, is mainly around mining. I think there's only two energy companies of which we are one, and there's only one helium company of which we are the only one. Just quickly, the obligatory disclaimer for all the speed readers out there. So who is D3 Energy? I start off with a corporate snapshot. Recently listed. We've only been listed since the 13th of May. We've been working on this asset probably for the last 3 years in getting it to that point. Essentially held by management and insiders, some high net worths and people who work with myself and Matt Warner to identify this opportunity. And it is rather a unique opportunity, hopefully, that you'll come to see as I progress through the presentation. Helium is probably not well understood, and I'll quickly talk to that in the next few slides. But what we have here is a world-class asset and a world-class helium asset by any measure, world-class helium concentrations. And importantly, and hopefully at the end of this presentation you get a sense, we're a company, we're an asset, we're a project that has wells that pay off in months, not years. We're talking short timeframes here. I'm not trying to tell everybody here how to suck eggs. I get that we're all probably familiar with helium as far as party balloons are concerned, and maybe we're even familiar with helium as far as weather balloons are concerned, and maybe a few other things if you're a diver and the like. But helium today, and increasingly so, is becoming more and more important in the 21st century. I refer to it here as a 21st century mineral. Anything that's got a semiconductor, anything that's got a microchip, anything that in essence is related to the world that we currently live in needs helium. It needs helium for either cooling, MRI machines, where the whole planet is an aging population, so MRI machines becoming more and more important, more and more MRI machines. AI will probably double the demand for helium in the next 3 to 5 years. You're probably also not sure helium in rockets. Helium is the second smallest molecule on the planet. The only one smaller is hydrogen. Hydrogen is the fuel for rockets. How do you flush rockets out so that there are no contaminants? Well, it can only be the second smallest, which is helium. So used in many, many more uses than I think many of us, and I for one knew before I got into this space, probably 3.5 years. I started out as a geologist in petroleum engineering. This is new for me. I still learn even to this day. Because it's under increasing demand, we've got a typical supply-demand issue where demand is exceeding supply. As a consequence, we've had, over the last 5 years, I think 18% per annum increases in helium price. That obviously has, in helium demand, but that obviously has an impact on price. So price has gone, and so you look at this chart here, 2001, and by way of reference, natural gas prices today, depending where you are, if you're in the US here, you're $2.50 to $3 to $4 an MCF. If you're in Europe, you're 15 to maybe 19. If you're LNG and in Asia, you're $20 an MCF. In 2001, helium for the same unit volume was $70 an MCF. It's now long-term contracts, 500 plus. Spot pricing of $1,500 to $2,500 in particular for military applications. And it's only predicted to go higher. So looking at our portfolio, we have 4 assets. If you look at the slide, I suppose, or the figure on the right here, the gold area is a company called Renogen. They are listed on the ASX as we are. They've been in operation for a while. The guys that actually identified that acreage for Renogen in another life are the guys that also acquired the acreage for us. And our acreage is the pale colours, the green, the pale blue, the yellow and the orange. Roughly comparable acreage position. And as a consequence, roughly comparable reserve and resource position. For us, not so much reserve, but in totality resource. We will be a reserve when we take the next step, which I'll talk to. But as I said, some of the best helium concentrations in the world of 4 to 9%. Put that in context, Qatar is the largest producer of helium in the world. It's a function of the massive amounts of LNG that they produce. They're 0.04%. Now, on any given day, and by the way, producing natural gas is not ubiquitous with producing helium. On any given day, Australia and Qatar toss up who's the largest producer of LNG in the world, yet we have no helium. So it's not ubiquitous with gas production. In our case, it's a function of some unique geological circumstances, which I won't go into, one of which is an impact crater and deep-seated regeneration of biogenic gas, because the other thing that separates us from many of our peers is you'll hear very often of green helium. Green helium is helium where the associated gas is nitrogen. In our case, the associated gas is methane. We don't see that as a negative, we see that as a positive. Methane has an intrinsic value, particularly if you're in South Africa, when on any given day there's 1 to 2 load shedding events. That's a euphemism for blackouts in an energy-starved country. So the tagline that I didn't mention there is, we consider ourselves at the appraisal, and hopefully you get a sense of that, not the exploration aspect. Looking at ER 315, which is the exploration right application, it's the green one. It's the only permit that we have resources for, independently certified resources from Sproul, the same company that does the independently certified reserves and resources for Contingent next door. We've undertaken a drilling program. We've had incredibly successful results. We've got helium concentrations measured, and these are measured after 2 weeks, or they're measured after 1 week of continuous production testing. Our production testing results here are not after hours, they're not even after a day, they're after 2 weeks, and the helium samples are collected after 1 week of continuous production, and those averages are averages over 2 weeks, if not longer. Importantly, these wells free flow. They free flow to surface. We have no downhole equipment, we have very low pressures. We essentially have no other associated issues, no water production. So as a consequence, as I say here, we have no issues. And hopefully you'll get a sense, it's why it's one of the lowest potential producing helium stroke natural gas projects anywhere in the world. If you look here, the dashed yellow line there is significant because it is the Virginia fault. It's that fault that represents the conduit for the gas to make its way to the surface. The gas, as I said, is biogenic. It's the same gas that's in your rubbish tip being generated. Here, it's being generated by the bacteria, in this case, a bit older, maybe 2 billion-year-old bacteria, but it's eating rock to make the methane. The helium is a function of radioactive decay of thorium and uranium, and it's continually being generated. We potentially will not see declines in these wells. And the reason why I say that is, you look at RBDO3 on this map and RBDO1, they're not wells that we drilled, and I shouldn't call them wells, they're boreholes. This is a gold exploration. This is probably, in the heyday, the 50s, 60s, 70s, this was the largest gold producing area in the world. They were exploration boreholes for gold. To this day, they still produce helium and methane. And RBDO3 was drilled in 1983 and RBDO1 was drilled in 1982. And they still produce, as you can see here, 147,000 cubic feet per day. We've just tested RBD10, 3, we're testing 1, we're testing 12. We see no decline. When we do, and as I said, I started geology, did petroleum reservoir engineering. I've never seen a test where I've depleted a reservoir and the pressure's gone back to where I started, if not higher in these cases. So we've got a unique set of circumstances. And importantly, possibly, we've still got to do some work, although Contingent next door would probably support this, production wells that don't decline, at least in 40 years and maybe the rest of my lifetime. As I mentioned, some of the lowest cost wells for the best return of any project, at least I've been involved in, where you see repayment periods or payback periods, and these are conservative. I'm using 100,000 standard cubic per day. You saw in the previous slide 140 to 190. I'm using 4.4% helium. We had 5.1. We've had as high as 7 elsewhere, and they pay back within 1.5 to 3 months. And the reason is, as I said, you look at the photo there. That's actually not a typical well site. That's our metering skid. That's set up to meter our testing for weeks and maybe months going forward. In a development scenario, you won't see any of that. I'm reluctant to call them wellheads. They're actually just a flange with a valve bolted on the top. I'll put that a metre below the surface. I'll have polypipe to a central gathering system where I'll separate the helium and the methane. The farmer can do whatever he wants. He can plant crops over it if he needs to. I never have to go back to it because there are no moving parts. These wells are such low pressure. I don't have to ever clean them out. I've got no swabbing operations. I got nothing. So as I mentioned, and the D3 energy, the D3 component of the name is the helium content. It's the helium. It's function of the D3, the third isochron around the sun when they first identified helium, which was called helios, which became helium. The energy is the fact that the other gas is methane, and South Africa needs a heap of it. If you look at the histogram or the bar graph on the bottom, the blue bar graph there, that literally is gas supply from Mozambique coming to South Africa falling off a cliff. And that's real, and it's real because it says 2024, and that's where we are today, and everybody in South Africa is finally across the challenges that represents for them. We're not going to fill that void. We'll be able to sell every molecule of gas that we have into that void. That void's going to be bigger than anything that we can produce, or for that matter, that Renogen. But it represents a great market for us. As I mentioned, we're in one of the largest gold producing areas historically. It means there's a lot of electrical infrastructure. So if we want to produce electrons with the gas, we've got the opportunity to do that because the grid and the wires, poles and wires are there. Importantly, you've got to have a means or an access path to market. We've got quite a few, I would argue. The first is Novo. I didn't mention on the corporate slide, the biggest shareholder there is Novo Energy. They're there because they used to be our joint venture partner. When we listed, we acquired their stake in the asset for shares in D3 Energy, and it's why Novo is the largest shareholder. But they are a gas wholesaler, retailer in certain circumstances in South Africa. It's compressed natural gas, but that there is our first means to market. And I wouldn't even have to strip the helium there. We could just add the higher hydrocarbons that Novo have in the rest of their gas stream, and we could be off to the races and off to market. We do need, however, access to market, and access to market means we need a production right. And that's the goal for us for the rest of this year and early next year. So to begin with, that production right will be underpinned by one of the largest contingent resources and hopefully soon to be reserved in South Africa. For just about any helium company in particular, or any company of our size on the ASX, the TSX, or even the AIM for that matter. We have got a simple, quick development plan to market to where we are hoping, if not the end of this year, early next year, to apply for a production right. That production right should hopefully only take us 12 months. That production right will then enable us to go into commercial production. We already have sufficient gas to kick that off with the wells that we've currently got, notwithstanding that we'll continue to do additional drilling. Large exploration upside, as I mentioned. The resources that we currently talk about, hopefully reserves, are only for one of 4 permits. So basically what we're saying is only a small percentage of the total acreage is actually currently explored. The outlook for helium the price outlook for helium is only going one way. Prices are only expected to increase as we continue to require more and more helium for what is our modern society. We do have genuine access to markets within South Africa. As I said, we've got the first access or the first opportunity to market through Novo. I think that's just one of a number of steps that will continue to evolve as more and more market opportunities become available to us. And this is not our first rodeo. The team that we've got have done this before. A previous company of mine was, we grew from modest beginnings of market cap of 20 million. We got taken out for over $1 billion by one of Australia's largest companies. And in the process, going from 0 reserves and resource base to 1.5 TCF or 1,500 petajoules of 2P. So as I sit here and as I stand here, I suppose this is one of, and I've been doing this a long time, this is one of the best walk-up starts I've seen as far as an energy project is concerned, notwithstanding that a big chunk of it is not energy, it's helium. Appreciate your time.
Just your quick macro feel of South Africa. Is it stabilizing with the Rand and then even the politics from Pretoria?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. The Rand's actually strengthening. The last election was a bit of a game changer for South Africa. You saw it's sort of an unofficial coalition where the ruling ANC party, which has gone from 100% to 60%, to 40%, so they couldn't govern on their own. They got 40%. They did a deal with the DA, which is Democratic Alliance. That is a fantastic outcome. That's democracy in action for South Africa. And I often get asked, well, I don't get asked. I get told, well, the cyber risk in South Africa is just too high. It's not. You know, in Victoria, New South Wales, in Australia, you haven't drilled a well for 5 years. You probably won't drill another one for 5 years. That company I was talking about was Eastern Star Gas, and Santos took us over in November 2011. Still don't have approval for that project. I've just drilled 3 wells in South Africa, and I got a government imploring me to apply for a production right. So it's a great question, yeah.
If you have these exploration holes for gold that are flowing measurable helium, why don't people exploit those as possible helium sources?
We are. So we've capped 1 and 3. We know already of 14 others. Most people don't even know about it. I'm amazed that this has gone on so long without. It's the farmers coming to us, and it's a great environment to work with. And when you're in Virginia, it's a local township, a country town. People in the town are coming to us and saying, "Can you find gas on my property? I think I've got a borehole that was drilled in 1980s or whatever." I'm glad they're not, because we are. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, guys.